Hey everyone, welcome to Smash Trivia. I'm your host, Smash Trivia John. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram by searching Smash Trivia to follow everything happening with me. I'll be the one with the big old green head in the profile picture. So excited to get into this. This is the Gamma Analysis. Basically, in this series, I'm going to review everything Hulk, all the movies, TV shows, and I also do random other geeky films. Occasionally, not so geeky ones too. And I also like to mix things up once in a while by not reviewing anything. Hope you enjoy Smash Trivia Presents The Gamma Analysis. I want to ask everyone listening if they can please do something for me. Please share the hell out of this podcast with all your friends. If you don't, Hulk will be angry. And Smash Trivia has a Patreon too, so please check that out. We have some fantastic extra content on there. I bet you'll have a Hulk smashing good time. The tiers are as follows: $1 a month is Hulkaholic for $1, $3 a month is the Reading Room with Hulky and Shulky, and $5 a month is Smashing the TV. I also now offer custom trivia games on Fiverr, so if you want to take your game night to the next level, you can hire me. A link to the Fiverr is in the episode description. The Gamma Analysis is also a part of the Blind Knowledge Podcast Network. Now that we have all that important stuff out of the way, let's smash right into this episode.
Welcome to C. McBee, home of Chunk McBeef Chest. This is a podcast where I take stupid questions way too seriously. Like, what if Bruce Banner put on adamantium pants and then transformed into the Hulk? What would happen? I answer that question definitively. If vampires are undead, that means they don't have a heartbeat. Can a vampire get a boner? I answer that question definitively. I also examine some of the most amusing musings on the internet and editorialize and take them way too seriously. Join us for C. McBee, the podcast from Chunk McBeef Chest.
Hey everyone, hello and hello my Gamma friends. Today I'm joined by my friend Mad Trivia John. How you doing, Mad Trivia John?
I'm all right, Smash Trivia John. How are you?
I'm doing good. And we're gonna be reviewing today The Mask, the Jim Carrey mask, not the Son of the Mask. That film I've never seen, and probably the only chance I'll ever watch it is probably if I decide to do it for a B Smash.
I have seen Son of the Mask, and despite the fact that it's got two great actors in it, it is nothing like the first one.
Not surprised. And before we get into it, obviously, as always, it's for a Hulkaholic for $1. We have Derek Sager, Gabriel Floral, Film Critter, and Stephen W. All right, let's get into this review. So I going back real quick to the Son of the Mask thing. What I find really interesting is there's now been two Mask adaptations into the comic, and instead of them progressively getting more accurate to the comic, because the comic was an extremely mature comic, instead it was PG-13 and then PG. I find that hilarious that they went in the exact opposite direction of how they should have.
And I honestly, despite the fact that it is kind of a shock at the same time, I have to look at it from the perspective of people loved The Mask so much, and for great reason. The movie was fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
If they had diverged from that and had the title The Mask in it and knew that it was related to that character, if they saw what the comic books were presenting after Jim Carrey presented his version, it would have gone, I think, considerably worse than Son of the Mask did.
I don't know. I feel like if there were like a sequel that had Jim Carrey in it and they made it R-rated, people would love it. I think that it would have been fantastic. But
I think I saw him say, like, if he had like a Nolan or someone like that direct it, he might do a sequel.
I don't. I think I read an interview where he said like he actually like refused to come back for a sequel. The main reason if he felt the film didn't need a sequel, which I can understand that. But also, I feel
Yeah.
like honestly, out of a lot of his films, this is one of the ones where you could easily make a sequel and it would work well because there's so much source material to draw from.
Yeah, and I mean that's to counter my own point. If I don't necessarily believe they would need to do a sequel to make it closer to the Dark Horse version, which I believe Dark Horse was
Mhm.
the publisher of
Yeah,
the
I
original.
believe so.
And if they were to do that, I don't necessarily think I'd want Jim Carrey to do it. I do love him as a comedic actor. I love him even as a dramatic actor. But the serious, more dark tones that could be presented with the mask, I think would suit a
I
much
have
more like maybe Alexander Skarsgård character.
have you read any of the Mask comics?
I have not.
I have not either. I just assumed that they were more mature in a sort of way like Deadpool, not in that they were like much more serious or something. I
I've read enough about them to know that it's like it's still zany, like in the vein of Deadpool, but I guess it's like more horrific, I think.
okay.
I could be misremembering.
Mhm.
Little peek behind the curtain in my life of Mad Trivia. I do have a mask trivia episode planned.
Okay. Now is that one that you've already recorded or
Nope,
is
I
that one
haven't.
you're okay?
It's in the tank. I haven't. I might even be able to get away with asking you a question or two on it today.
No,
But
well,
we'll cross that bridge
I
later.
mean, it all. I feel like the biggest thing it depends on is if the person who you're having on for it is one that probably would listen to this podcast,
I
or is
don't
it
think
or is it
so.
like since I know you've had like some celebrities on your podcast, as which definitely they probably would have listened to my podcast.
I'm trying to remember if I remember doing it, but I don't know where I put it. Maybe I
Well,
didn't already do it.
whatever,
No, I'm pretty sure I already
whatever.
did it.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I think it would be. I think
Oh, there it
if
is.
it does have to be a little bit more serious for or a more accurate adaptation, I do think Jim Carrey could still do it because like I've seen some of his dramatic work and he's actually really good at it at the dramatic stuff as well. So I think it's and to be honest, how I kind of feel with Jim Carrey films is that I loved his comedy back in the day, or back with his earlier work, and I still like his comedy when he does it in more recent films, but I do think he's become a even better actor in recent years with some of his dramatic work arc that I want to see him like return to some of his older roles and try and do a little bit deeper of versions of them. Like I would love to see him and do like do the Riddler again, but
Oh
giving
yeah.
some depth to that character. I think that would
I
be
could see
really
that.
interesting.
I could see that. Now, I mean, I think me and you have discussed this in the past. Have you seen the number 23?
Number 23, I don't think so.
That was one of the first movies I recall him being in that was much more dark toned. And he
Okay.
plays this character. I'll try not to give too much away, but he plays this character who's a writer. And he reads something about the number 23 being like everywhere, and then it starts happening to him.
Mm.
And it gets like really like crazy, like serious. It's a very good movie. I would love to talk about that
Uh,
one with you if you ever get the opportunity. I do own that one, and
mm,
it is highly recommended. But not just that, like
interesting. Yeah.
Eternal Sunshine, great
Oh
dramatic
yeah.
movie. Truman
One.
Show, great
Yeah.
dramatic
Oh
movie.
yeah. One of
He's got a
my.
list.
I haven't actually watched all of it, but one of the things he's done in recent years that I really enjoyed is a show they did called Kidding. Have you ever heard of that?
I have, and one of my buddies said it was one of the best shows he'd ever seen, and I
It
needed to
is
watch that show.
like I have not watched all of the show. All of the show. I like. If I remember, I binge watched like a whole bunch of episodes, and then never got back to watching it. But the it is it really is honestly incredible. It's like he plays like a sort of like or Mr. Rogers sort of role, but except but that it's a dark it's dark, and that he's that we get to see his life outside of that, and we find out how about how this character's or has had family members that have died, and he wants to get his boss, which happens to be his father-in-law, to let him do an episode about death on the children's show that he runs. And it's really honestly some pretty interesting stuff that they show in that show, and I definitely do recommend trying checking it out, because he's probably one of my, like, I think I wouldn't say one of my favorite Jim Carrey roles, always because I love his comedy, but I would say it's probably one of his best roles though.
I've legitimately never heard a bad thing about that show.
Yeah.
I do actually. I had completely forgot that it was a thing, and now I need, since you reminded me, I need to find a way to watch it. I know that it was like on Showtime or something,
Yeah.
and I definitely need to check that one out.
Mhm.
His acting abilities over the last 30 years have shown to be as diverse as anybody's can truly be. I
Oh yeah.
mean, his funny can be serious, but can also be really funny, but can also be really dark. I mean, we saw 94, I believe, was the year The Mask came out, and it also had Dumb and Dumber. It also had Ace Ventura. Like those few years, he had Ace Ventura, Dumb and Dumber, Liar Liar. Um, uh, his movies were just all over the place in terms of
Oh
his
yeah.
ability. And then the early 2000s came, and he started delving into the more serious tone stuff.
Hmm.
And he is just such an incredibly talented actor. And he's not even just that. Like, over the last few years, if you followed him on social media in any capacity, you know he's a really deep human being.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I think he said he was retiring from acting.
Oh yeah, yeah. He said I don't know if matter if it was last year or if it was the year before, or when Sonic the Hedgehog 2 came out, he was doing interviews, and he said that that this might be his last movie. That you won't hear actors often say this, but I have enough, and that and he has not done a film since.
And if he calls it a career on Sonic 2, yes, I'll be bummed out. But those Sonic movies were fantastic.
Oh yeah, he's so good as Dr. Robotnik. Oh my
Oh my
god.
God, yes. And even like everyone kind of shunned him to some degree because of how he looked in the first one. And then when he showed up in the second one looking like Eggman, it was just chef's kiss.
Oh yeah. I I read sign that he said in an interview that I find really interesting. So he said that for playing villains, he will only play a character like Dr. Robotnik, because Dr. Robotnik is so ridiculous that there's not going to be people who are trying to imitate what he does in the film for actual evil acts in real life. And I find that to be such an interesting take that I don't think I've ever heard any actor say before.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that either. And aside from the Robotnik role and the Riddler role, I can't think of any other villainous roles he's played. And
Well,
that kind of defines both of those characters.
there is one other, but by the end of the film, he's no longer a villain, which is the Grinch. But
Oh
that's
yeah,
exactly this. That's in that same vein of, like, it's so ridiculous that people are not gonna copy that for real life
yeah.
things.
I mean, they would have to grow green fur and shrink their heart down 3 sizes. It'd be a little bit complicated.
Yeah, just a little bit.
I mean, he did play Scrooge, so I suppose it's not, but that was also CG. So I guess,
Hmm.
eh.
Yeah, but also, I feel like a lot of the things in a Christmas Carol film because it's set so long ago. The things that he does and that there are evil are things that you don't really see now in the same way. Like you're not gonna have someone on like going down to onto the boss's house and telling them my child is gonna die in a couple days, Azor dying, and then he refuses to help.
You
Most
know.
people are not going to go to their other boss and ask them to help up when their child is going to die in a couple days.
Yeah, no, that's pretty fair. And yeah, there isn't really too many Tiny Tim situations nowadays.
So talking about this film though, actually, um, it had been a good probably like 5-6 years since I'd watched this film. This film still holds up really well. This is such a fun film. I do think there's a little bit of like it feels a little sexist at times, but it's I think for the time that it came out, it's better than probably a lot of other things that happened back then.
Yeah, I mean, it it's kind of also acceptable in the way that it's a comic book movie
Hmm.
because it is satirical and it is kind of spoofy, but it wasn't meant to be taken seriously
Yeah.
because you have things like him turning into a wolf and whistling, legitimately
Oh yeah.
catcalling as a dog. Like that's kind of mocking, I guess you could say, in the way
Oh
a
yeah.
cat call. So, I mean, I didn't take it as sexist. I took it as comedic, and I
Oh
think
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the main feminist character or feminine character, Cameron Diaz, I think she definitely
Mm.
held her own in terms of
Oh yeah.
being able to keep up with it.
Definitely. Um, One thing I find really interesting is that Cameron Diaz has had multiple roles where she's the love interest as against a green character. Since both in this with the mask and she's also Fiona in Shrek.
Oh yeah, that's right. Huh. Yeah,
Yeah,
she does have a thing for green guys.
I
Kind of
guess.
shocking she wasn't like the bride of the Grinch.
Oh man, yeah.
I totally
Which
forgot about
that
that.
might have been it might have been too on the nose if they had done that because Jim Carrey was also playing the Grinch.
Yeah. But
Oh,
I mean, I'm sure she didn't have a bad time
yes,
with him.
yeah. I also speaking of Karen Diaz, I honestly really kind of I since we saw a lot of different characters in the film get to wear the mask and we see like the like what their version of what that would be like is I kind of wish we got to see Cameron Diaz's character or wear it. I feel like that would be really fun on seeing how her character would act with the mask on.
I think it would have been good too. Now, the only reason I suspect that it might have been written in there because this wasn't a super long movie.
Mhm.
And I think that they could have written that in there if they hadn't used someone with the I'd like to say the rookie chops that Cameron Diaz has or had because
Mhm.
this was her first movie.
Oh yeah,
So
that's
I think
absolutely
that
understandable.
they didn't want to push her too far. Which don't get me wrong, she did great in the movie. For her first
Hmm.
film, she did seriously hold her own against someone like Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
Um, she did great. So
Hmm.
of course, props to her. But I don't think they wanted to push it too far because then it might have gotten a little bit out of hand.
Oh, one thing else I think that I found really interesting while watching is that my on the copy of the film that I watched, the subtitles did not match what was actually being said, which makes me wonder if there's another version of the film out there with different dialogue. Because there's like I first noticed this when there's a scene where the lead mobster or the main bad guy says as get that green faced son of a bitch. But in the subtitles, my subtitles simply said get that green bastard, which really makes me interested in knowing if there is like out there somewhere, even though I couldn't find much information online about one. And I did find out that there was like a work print version of the film that was actually like more violent or something, but I didn't take the time to actually try and find that to watch it. I should, but that it is interesting to me that there might be out there like a different version of the film with a little bit different dialogue.
So may I ask, how did you watch the movie?
I watched it through Yo Ho Ways.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
See, I watched it on Hulu,
hmm
and they did match up on Hulu. So I'm wondering if it was just a quick type up that was going along with your methods, because I had never heard
Maybe.
that before.
Yeah.
I mean, not to say that it's not true, not an existing thing, but some
Mm.
people, if they're typing up things like that to try to keep up, they simplify.
That
Um,
makes sense.
like on Netflix, if you ever watch shows on Netflix and you watch it with closed captions, you'll see that a lot of the time they paraphrase.
Makes
So it's
sense.
possible that's what they did. Um,
Yeah.
but I did I also watch everything with subtitles now, and I have no way, shape, or form of understanding how I missed some of the things that I missed. Like the first time I watched some of these movies from way back when,
hmm
because seeing what they're actually saying when you don't know what they're saying half the time before, like because Jim
hmm
Carrey talks fast,
I
and
feel
then
like
yeah,
I feel like in part it's art is because um even though yes you are definitely a bit older than I am, but I imagine it's still just like me, you were probably a kid when you watched this for the first time.
yeah, I was like
And
six.
people easily miss things when they watch things while when they're a kid. Like
What, like pulling a condom out of his pocket?
Oh yeah, like or like like when I was a kid, and I when I first watched the Madagascar movies, I never as a kid would have caught um Marty's secretive way of being able to say shit in the film of sugar honey iced tea.
Oh, I've known about that since high school. I had
Yeah.
a kid, so I was in chorus, and we had this really really big dude, and he was never like, he was very polite, but he was also one of those people that if he was going to say something, he would say it like that. So he was like, "Oh, sugar honey iced tea." It took me a couple of times of him saying it to understand he was basically
Uh,
just spelling it out phonetically, but it's
yeah,
really it's
I do
clever.
find I really do find it interesting like how much so though like we really do miss a lot of like the more adult jokes in films when we first watched it as kids. And I love getting to go back and watch films that I watched as a kid now as an adult so that I can catch all of those. It makes for I think an even more fun experience as to actually finally be able to catch all those.
Yeah, I agree. I that's one of the reasons like I do subtitles now, because it's one of those often times where you'll get distracted for a half a second and you won't see something and you won't hear something, and then you'll see
Mm-hmm.
that something has changed or some kind of effect. But if you can't like fully pay attention and you glance at the screen and you just happen to see the words, you can almost always absorb more than you would have just by watching it. So I feel like
Makes
that's why I've
sense.
added subtitles to my life.
Oh yeah, I can understand that. Which I feel like that scene though where you mentioned like you bring grabbing a condom out where he was making all of those balloon animals. Even that's not like one of the most iconic scenes from the movie, but it's still such a great scene. It's a hilarious scene.
Yes. I mean,
Uh,
I was making my dinner while watching this simultaneously. My son was watching it with me too. And he actually sat down and watched it, which was kind of entertaining. But I'm in the other room cooking dinner and I can hear it in the room. And I'm like, yeah, yeah. Tommy got like I can still quote this movie pretty accurately from another room just by hearing what's coming.
yeah.
Like I can hear the sound of it. This movie has so many moments.
hmm I read though that apparently one of the there is like a deleted scene from the film where those same people who first asked him if he knows what the time is, if he's got the time, and then they try to beat him up, but he's like, nope, I'm gonna make you guys balloon animals instead. And there's like an actual deleted scene, and apparently that explains why they ask him and what the time is. Apparently, there's a deleted scene from earlier in the film where while he was not the mask, they took his watch, and then which also explains why he did not know what the time was when his landlord asked for the time. Asked him, and do you know what time it is? Yeah,
Yeah,
which
that's
is
actually really cool.
if I remember what I read was that's actually one of the things that's in the work print version of the film that was like one of the more violent scenes apparently somehow and they and apparently I don't know where to find it, but it's but apparently this version of the film is somewhere online, and it doesn't have like all of the special effects added to it, so you like apparently will actually see like Jim Carrey's like I trying to bounce around to act like when they add like the Tasmanian devil stuff to the mask which honestly makes me really want to see that version of film
Yeah.
see what it's like watching that. I think that would be really interesting.
I feel like that would have the same effect on us that the Shrek featuring Chris Farley scenes did.
Oh yeah.
I don't know that I'd ever need to see it, but I would want to just for curiosity's sake.
Oh
But
yeah.
there's just so much to this movie that they didn't need to change that was already perfect the way it was. Where
Yeah.
I don't know if I need to see an alternate version of it. Do I think it'd be interesting to see what some of the stuff they took out
Mm-hmm.
was? Sure, for sure.
Yeah, I both find would really want to watch it both to see both a more of Jim Carrey being wacky, and then but also what I read was it is like a more violent version, but they had cut down a lot of it so they could be PG-13 so the families would go see it,
Yeah.
which um I don't know that would have been a better film if they kept those things in, but I do think it would be something really interesting to see what those scenes would have been like.
No, that I could agree with. I mean, like almost like a deleted scene reel would be nice.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I mean, did you know, on the topic of Jim Carrey and all the things that he did, do you know how much, or did you know that a lot of the stuff that he did that seemed like CGI wasn't?
I'm not surprised. I expected probably a lot of it. It was mostly him acting, and they added little bits. It's to over that to really solidify like transitions between him being in the light green mask and in the normal look.
Yeah, I mean, the mask itself, he only had teeth put in. Everything else was, and he didn't ADR that. I
Hmm.
read that he didn't ADR that. He actually just learned how to speak with those teeth in, which great stuff. But like
Yeah.
the scene where he's getting shot at the club in the middle of the movie, if I'm remembering correctly, a lot of that when he was getting shot at, besides the obvious, was actually just his body moving the way he can move it,
Nice.
which is fantastic.
Oh yeah, definitely. One thing while watching the film that I really enjoy a lot, which makes me even more one sign that I've been wanting to do for a while, which is I loved all of like the musical sequences in the film, which I have been wanting to actually like review a musical on my podcast for a while, and just seeing all of these in this film made me want it even more.
Cuban Pete was the greatest musical number of the 90s. You can't win that argument against me. Cuban Pete. And the moment it came on, I'm sitting there singing, doing the dances. I got so into that, and with Jim Carrey, every time he does something like that, because that was him singing.
Mhm.
And the Cable Guy, he does "Somebody to Love" by Jefferson Airplane. He does it. He is fantastic when he does stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Oh man, yeah. I would honestly love seeing like a full on Jim Carrey a musical film. I think that would be amazing to watch.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And it could be satire. It could be all songs he made up. I'd be in.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I'd be in.
definitely. Oh, some one like really small moment in the film, but that I don't know why it made me laugh as much as it did, but it really makes me laugh. Is when Stanley gets into the car with the reporter lady and she just says seatbelts.
Yeah, I
It's
giggled
like
at
it's
that too.
such a small little thing, but I just found it really hilarious.
It's just all the more funny because A, they're getting shot at by the cops, and B, she knows she's taking him to give him up
Yeah.
to Dorian. So it's like, what the fuck do you care?
I do find it like a little bit interesting to like they had it was a twist in the film of like with a lot of I feel like a lot of films from the 90s they would have that we have this super hot lady and then we have this other lady who is still attractive but is not odd at the same level as the other woman and they make it so that the main character ends up being with the woman who is not as out of this world looking in a lot of films as a way to be like this is like the realistic option. I thought it was a really nice twist in this that instead for this film they were like we're going to make that more realistic option be the person who betrays him is him and then
Yeah.
the absolutely ridiculously hot version and be the one that he actually ends up being with.
Yeah, that was a nice touch. And I can't say that I remember, because like I said, I was 6 when the movie came out, but I can't say that for sure that that's what I expected either, because again, 6. But
Mhm.
going back to it now, yeah, you don't see that very often.
Yeah, like I feel like a lot of the films from the 90s, you would have like there'd be two women in it. One of them is out of this world hot, and then another is like um supposed to be like this realistic one and like they'll make it out in the film as if it's supposed to be a uh a not a super attractive person, even though everyone in the audience knows the person is still very conventionally hot. And
Oh, what,
then
like
if
Gwyneth
the person
Paltrow and Shallow Hal?
um I don't recognize
Oh,
that
you haven't seen Shallow
reference.
Hal?
Like I'm thinking more of the this is also another parody film, but the thing that aimed at comes closest in my mind to what I'm thinking of is not another Team New movie.
It's been so long since I've seen that I don't remember how
Yeah.
that goes. I don't even know if I know who that character was. Sorry, he's deciding to open up a Capri
That's
Sun on the
it's all
table.
right. It's absolutely all right. I don't mind.
Um, so because I mentioned it already. Okay. Um, because I mentioned, I'll just because I know a lot of people have seen the movie. In Shallow Hal, Jack Black is the character Shallow Hal, and he's really shallow. He only sees, pretty women. So in the movie, he sees Gwyneth Paltrow, who we all know, Pepper Potts, as Gwyneth Paltrow.
Hmm.
But to everybody else, there's a reason he sees her as Gwyneth Paltrow. He got like his mind messed with or whatever. But in real life, she's massive, and he falls in love with her thinking she's Gwyneth Paltrow, and then he loses that, the gift of seeing the personality is what it's called, and he stays in love with her because he fell in love with her, not for her looks but for her personality. So I guess it's similar, but it's not quite the same. But I to that end, that's like I do see that exact idea
Hmm.
behind it.
Yeah. I feel like I'm not like explaining what I mean well though, but it is. I do think that is like a trope in a lot of like '90s and early 2000s films of like we need to make the main character be with the person who they're not as hot, but everyone in the audience really knows they are still hot, but they just have more personality. Versus this film's like we're going to completely subvert expectations, and we're going to let him at the main character be with the insanely hot woman, and which in most films I can understand why that might not work because they do want there to be like a not make like the audience's expectations of ends of dating be too high, but I think with a film like this, because it is so ridiculous, that makes it work well.
I get that. I think that it isn't. I don't necessarily think it was a bad trope, but
I'm not saying it was a bad trope in the '90s. I'm just saying it is a trope that I
yeah,
think that happened a lot.
yeah. And now that I'm thinking about it, you're absolutely right. And I mean, they kind of still do it now to some degree. I feel like it's a lot less common, I guess you could say. But they also, generally speaking, and it's pretty shitty, but they also still now, generally speaking, usually only cast the hottest characters or the hottest people for the hot roles. Like
Hmm.
they'll throw glasses on a woman and they'll say she's less attractive. They'll peel the glasses off and say she's hotter.
Yeah, yeah, that is
Eh,
exactly.
and what's worse is we as men don't have that subjugation. Like the only movie that I can think that they have ever done that in my memory that I remember. Now I'm not saying it's the only instance of it, but the only time I can think about it that comes to mind is Iron Man 3 with the bad guy. I can't remember his name right now. But early in the movie he's got the braces and the big glasses and he's got the really super nerdy look and then he comes in later in
Hmm.
the movie and is all handsomed up and
Oh yeah,
that's the only time I think I can recall where they did it to a guy. And
yeah,
I don't know. I don't see any reason for them doing that anymore. They could just as easily cast kind of like they did with the mask,
yeah.
the lesser and the more. And I mean, again, that's also me saying that, sounding like I'm degrading the character that played Peggy
Hmm.
Brandt. She
Oh yeah,
wasn't
no.
unattractive, but
Yeah, yeah. Like that's why I mean. Like it's supposed to be like the quote unquote less attractive version, but everyone in the audience knows that she's still
yeah, yeah.
very conventionally hot.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, they even noted that in the movie when his buddy Charlie was like, red hair, full pouty lips, a blouse and a name badge. And he was like, wow, you really narrowed it down. Like they were really straight up like saying she was beautiful. So that wasn't, I guess they kind of dodged that whole idea
Hmm.
on purpose. But to your point, yeah, I guess it is very unusual for him to, or for the main antagonist to get the unexpected blonde bombshell character, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Moving on from this topic, since I think we've talked about this to death. The villain in the film, when he puts on the mask, I feel like they treated it makeup for him very differently than they did with Jim Carrey's. As for him, it actually does look like it is he's just wearing a mask. Well, it looks like it's skin on Jim Carrey's face, which I find very interesting. And also, to me, honestly, when the villain is wearing the mask, he doesn't look at all like the actor who's playing him. I'm wondering whether they actually had a different actor be the character when he's in mask form.
They did, and the only reason you can, I mean, if you're not paying attention, you might miss it, but it is like it is a thick boy under
Oh
that
yeah.
mask, and I want to say his name was like Robert Green, the actor
I,
that played
I
him in non-mask form. And he's
I
scrawny, super
wonder
scrawny.
I wonder why they chose to do that, and not just do the exact same method they would have done with Jim Carrey as the mask.
They kind of hint at it in the movie. Um, if you really think about what Jim Carrey says when he's in prison, it amplifies the wants of the person who wears it.
Mm-hmm.
So for someone like Stanley Ipkiss, he was repressed and a hopeless romantic, and it made him into a love crazy wild man. Someone like
Mm-hmm.
Dorian, who's already a evil, conniving bastard, he wants to be the top dog, the head honcho. So he puts on the mask and he becomes this Lou Ferrigno, bulky. I can beat everyone's ass because I'm
Mm-hmm.
big, and I think that was intentional.
Oh, that makes sense. Now,
Um, I also would
do
like
you?
to know, I didn't pay attention, but I'd like to know who was behind that second mask.
Yeah, I don't know what the actor was. Now, do you agree with me, though, that with what they showed with the villain when he was wearing the mask, that it very much does feel like it is an actor wearing a mask and not skin. And versus when it's on Jim Carrey's face, it very much looks like that's just his skin.
Yeah, I do. And I think it's because of those like almost like gill things that he ends up having.
Yeah.
Like he's got mutton chops that are very defined when he's wearing that mask. And it like I said, he's got like these gill things, and it does look like just
Hmm.
an aggressive amount of makeup
Yeah.
over his skin versus where Jim Carrey it just looks like green paint with a bald cap.
Hmm. Yeah. Which it like honestly, this film uh, um perfectly makes him like Jim Carrey look like the character in the comics. I'm pretty sure even down to like the shape of the head. They shaped his head while the for when he's in the mask form, so that he looks like the shape of the head in the comics, which is I find that really cool.
Yeah, I did see. I have seen pictures of the mask in the comic book form. And it is, despite the zany structure of his teeth, like when he smiles, it's obviously massive. Other than that, I mean, even to some degree, it's not even that far fetched from where it was to where it was in the movie. Um, it is pretty uncanny.
Hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. And like I think the movements of the character work so well. And I love how a lot of the personality that we get from Jim Carrey while he's in the mask form it's not just the hopeless romantic thing, but also there's a lot of it that is formed from the fact that Stanley Ipkiss watches so many cartoons, and I love that. As you said earlier about when he turns into a dog and howls at Cameron Diaz, as that was literally a cartoon that he watched earlier in the film, and we
Yep.
saw, and like he various times throughout the film does Tasmanian devil stuff, which we saw like in his very first scene in the film. In his desk drawer, we find that he is a fan of Looney Tunes, where
Yep.
Tasmanian devil is from.
Yep. And then you've got the hammer, the gigantic sledgehammer. That's wicked
Mm-hmm.
comedic trope, wicked
Oh yeah,
cartoon trope. The awuga,
yeah.
the horn. I mean, he is very much a
Oh
cartoon
yeah.
character, and I'm still truly impressed as to how well the CG holds up. It's not
Oh
fantastic,
yeah. Definitely.
but for '94, it was
Like
pretty
uh,
solid.
like when he's flat on the ground and he said, "Look, Mom, I'm roadkill." That actually looks really good, and there's no way that was done practically.
No, no way. And yeah, it does look really good. I mean, the effects were solid. It was very much the early age of advancing CG,
Hmm.
but the effects were solid.
Yeah.
And I'm trying like even the balloon machine gun, fantastic. Like
Oh
the
yeah.
conversion of it going from balloon to gun, when all he did was pull, it was very not
Yeah. Oh
seamless, but it
yeah.
was really
Definitely.
good. So yeah, I mean, the
Yeah.
effects of this movie were solid, but he definitely was a cartoon character.
Yeah. Which that's how exactly how the character should be. Uh, eh, um, I love when when like they stop a scene mid scene just so he can grab a makeshift version of the Oscar award because he was doing those like impressions. I thought that was really funny. I though I'm wondering if like because it's definitely not the actual an actual Oscar award because it was like a clear plastic instead of it being a golden man. I'm wondering if they did not get the rights to be able to use those the look of the Oscar awards in the film.
That's it, probably. I mean, the Oscars are coveted. They didn't want to just give it to anybody. But
Dude.
we love him. We really, really love him.
Uh, so when he was doing all those impressions and in that one scene, did you recognize any of them?
Some of them, yes.
Like
Some of them,
I knew what I knew, even though I don't think I've actually ever seen in Old Yeller. I recognized one of them was from Old Yeller because he literally said that name and but the rest of them I didn't really recognize what they were from.
so to give a little callback to earlier, um, tell Tiny Tim I won't be coming home for this Christmas. Was a Tiny Tim Scrooge reference. Um, tell Scott I do give a damn. Um, I think I think that's like maybe like Casablanca or something. I could be wrong on that one, but I recognize it somewhere. I know I've seen it in some form of media before. You got me, partner was definitely a Western.
Yeah.
Jeez, you got me, partner. I'm trying to think if there was anything else in there.
Uh,
I think that was it.
yeah, but I found it really interesting. How surprisingly, none of those references were from films I've ever actually seen. So I wasn't able to recognize any of them. Yeah. I think what other big parts of the film have we not talked about yet that we probably should.
The end. The end scene with the fighting at the club,
Oh,
that deserves a whole conversation.
that's yeah, that was honestly so much fun. I loved seeing the dog wear the
Yes.
mask. Um,
Yeah.
which it made me have a thought in my head when Stanley picked him up and he said that this is a new breed. It made me actually wonder if the mask had sex with someone, would they create masked babies, or would it just be normal human babies?
Uh, for the answer to this question and more, watch Son of the Mask.
Oh God.
Yeah, so little spoiler for the Son of the Mask. If you decide to ever watch it, or never to watch it, I don't blame you. Jamie Kennedy, his character acquires the mask. He puts it on, sleeps with his wife, gets her pregnant. Baby's born with mask powers without looking like the mask.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
the whole premise of the movie is basically Loki wants to steal the baby.
Oh, okay. At least it's not just like a shameless remake of the film, but with the child characters aside.
No one's looking at you, Ace Ventura Jr.
Like, like I had honestly thought like the Son of the Mask film, it would have just simply been that random characters in the film would get a hold of the mask because of Milo taking the mask out of the ocean. So I'm guessing it would just have like been hidden in their house for many years
Yeah,
until like a
just hidden in the
child
closet.
until their child found it and put it on.
Yeah, it's just in the closet somewhere.
I mean, they were able to hide a massive amount of money in the closet in this.
Yeah, that was another wild thing. Just hundreds and hundreds of bills. That was
Oh
wild.
yeah.
Um, But yeah, like that. Besides the dog, which the dog was fantastic at that last part.
Yeah.
I loved him when he first puts the mask on and starts scaring the guy with the long hair, and he makes the faces, and I'm just pissing myself like he was peeing on that guy's head. It was great, and the noise like he's oh, who's that dog that makes that sound? Because that was like one of those characters. That was another cartoon character that sounded exactly like that. That made that exact sound. It was I can't remember the dog's name, but it was like another cartoon. But that was great. When he pulled the mask off the dog's face got all puffy, like his eyes were gonna blow out of his head. Stuff like that was great. But
Yeah.
the comedy in that scene was great. Like when he jumps over the counter, did you miss me? And he drinks the orange juice and he starts pouring
Oh
juice
yeah,
out of his
definitely.
body. Like just
I guess
silly
not.
stuff. And then of course the eating the dynamite. That's so spicy meatball.
Yes, and like he literally drew a flush thing on the wall and then flushed the villain down. Which I wonder
Yeah.
where that led the villain. Did he
To the
just go
sewer.
out of existence?
Yeah, he flushed him away. Just away. Um, Speaking of the random stuff that he had and could do, I'm going to give you a little piece of trivia, or more or less ask you a question.
Okay.
Um, how did they make the pockets work? Because specifically when the cops are searching him,
Um,
because you see them pulling stuff out of his pockets.
I would I may very easily be wrong here, but I'm guessing clever camera work and that there would have been like a bag behind him full of stuff that the pocket just led into.
You're not too far off. So it was clever camera work. Below the bottom of the screen, his pants were cut into shorts, and people were feeding stuff up through the pockets.
But no, it is not. I think some of that stuff though. Oh, I feel like actually would have been too big to fit through the length of a
Well, yeah,
pocket.
the bazooka was already out of the pocket.
Yeah, it
when
makes me want.
struck.
Yeah, like I feel like the bazooka, like even if you have the tallest pocket in the world, there's still the problem of the length of the pocket being not be able to fit through the
Yeah, he had the Mary Poppins pockets.
uh-huh. I
But
love
yeah,
when
that was cool.
yeah, I love in that scene of like it's like I've never seen that thing in my life. I have a permit for that.
Picture
And
of
like
Calloway's wife.
and like the other cops, like they're not even phased by there being a picture of their boss's wife in this guy's pockets. I find that one uh, most
Yeah,
hilarious.
you son of a bitch. I
Oh,
mean, you married her. That movie was great. I am so glad I watched it again. It just rekindled my love for it all over
oh
again.
yeah, definitely. Now, would you want to see now like an like not particularly starring any Jim Carrey, but like an actual like a faithful adaptation of the comics come out as a movie, R-rated, and just as balls off the wall as they can possibly make it. Would you want to see something like that come out now?
Yes, but I think for the sake of it being genuinely like faithful to the comics, I would probably rather it be animated.
I can understand that. Which there actually was like a apparently I never watched it, but there was like a spin-off of this film that was an animated a mass adaptation, and I've heard that apparently there's an episode in it where even though Jim Carrey does not voice either of the characters, there's the mask crosses over with Ace Ventura.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
I don't know if you must have heard of Freakazoid.
I've heard of it. I don't think I've ever watched it, but yeah.
If you ever get the chance, Freakazoid is like it's an animated show. It came out around the same time as the Animaniacs, and it's pretty much the mask, but without the mask.
Okay.
It's great. That's a great show.
Uh,
But yeah, I think a modern day adaptation would be good,
Mm-hmm.
as long as it was either animated or heavily CG'd for certain stuff.
I can understand that. I think that would be I think that would be a lot of fun. I do think there would be a lot of annoyed people that are way too like obsessed with this film being just perfect that they would not be willing to accept it after that. But I for one would definitely enjoy it. Like I know a lot of people absolutely hated the Hellboy film from a couple of years ago that David
Oh,
Harbour
David Harbour, yeah.
starred in. I loved it for the main reason that I loved getting an R-rated Hellboy film since both of the Leonardo del Toro films from with Ron Perlman as the lead in the early 2000s, those were both PG-13. I meant it like I don't think the R-rated adaptation starring David Harbour is perfect, but I do love that they were willing to let it be R-rated.
It deserved to be R-rated.
Hmm.
But I never got to see that one. I do think that if Perlman's version had been R-rated, they could have done far better than they were.
Oh yeah,
But I did love the Perlman version, so I don't
I
really.
love the Perlman versions too. It's not I'm not definitely not trying to say the David Harbour one's better, but I love it for the fact that that they were willing to just embrace that R rating and that which sadly because it was in the early 2000s and in the 90s, superhero films were for the most part are were PG-13. They weren't allowed. They most likely the studio probably didn't allow Guillermo del Toro to probably make them like those two ones from the early 2000s to be R rated.
Which is a shame because Blade was a perfect
Oh
series. Well,
yeah,
not perfect series, but perfect reasoning for it being
though
R-rated.
yeah, though I love the Blade films. I'm very interested in what's gonna happen when the MCU version happens because you have I think that it's gonna be very hard with those that to strike a balance where you're able to make everyone happy because either you make it be very serious areas to appease the comic fans and or they make it actually feel exactly like how the Blade films from the early 2000s felt. Because if you go back and watch those Blade films, those are some wacky and ridiculous films, campy as hell. Hell, and I think that if they just made the MCU Blade exactly how they did that, you would have a lot of comic fans and just as getting so mad because they don't like that they didn't make it serious.
They were, to me, they were just campy enough. Like, you can't argue the fact that they were gory as all hell. I mean, the iconic opening scene of Blade
Oh yeah,
One.
it's yeah. I think they are absolutely amazing films, but they are but I because I watched them for the first time a couple of years ago. I think I'm more able to see that the fact that they are extremely campy films.
Yeah, maybe that's why. I mean, it's been a little while since I've watched them, but I mean, I can't say that I don't see where you're coming from though, because of course Wesley Snipes definitely made some puns. There was
Yeah.
definitely some jokes in there,
Hmm.
especially in the third one with. I mean,
Yeah.
come on, Ryan Reynolds. Uh, it's
Right.
hard. I mean, fuck, they had Triple H. I mean, they had Dominic
Uh,
Purcell as Dracula. It, it's
yeah.
it, I mean, they had so many different cheesy things. Like Donald,
Like
was it Donald Logue was the bad guy,
I feel
the one of
like
the bad guys.
I feel like the reason I say like it'll be very hard for the R with the MCU films because it is that if you make them feel like they did in the originals, you're going to make the people who love the originals really happy, but you're going to make comic fans angry because there are so many comic fans who don't like things being ampy. But if you make it really serious, like what the comic fans want you're going to lose the people who love the original films because they want the new film to feel like what they remember watching.
I mean, I agree to some extent, but I'm one of those people who accepts change when it's good. And I think, I mean, with the amount of time alone that they've been spending on writing this movie and then rewriting it, finding a good director, with a character being portrayed by Mahershala Ali, there's no doubt that the character is going to be performed well.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very talented actor. There's no question of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think to diverge from Wesley Snipes wouldn't necessarily detract from the movie. I think it would give it its own unique qualities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they could blend a perfect amount of camp with a perfect amount of serious. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we know the MCU is not perfect.
Yeah.
It's got its
Well, yeah.
problems. We're looking at you, Thor: Love and Thunder. I like there's no doubt that some have been written worse than others, but generally speaking, and I mean I'm of course stressing this across the board across like 40 projects now. In Feige, I trust
Mm-hmm.
his love for the comics and
Oh
his little
yeah.
touch on everything. I feel like we'll be okay.
Yeah.
Now you're gonna have the people who have sticks up their asses.
Yeah,
Suck
that
it
yeah.
up.
I'm the like I'm probably gonna enjoy the Blade film no matter what. But I do think that they are going to have the problem of, like, they're like, whichever direction they go in, there will be a massive amount of people who complain.
Oh, no doubt about it. And it would be wrong to not have people complain because there is no such thing as a perfect movie. Every single film that's ever been made, no matter if it's got 100% on Rotten Tomatoes or 100% critic score or 100% on, viewer score, whatever, there's still going to be a problem in the movie somewhere, whether it
Oh
be a continuity error or a word that was used incorrectly or
yeah.
what it could be anything. That's why there's always going to be people on the internet to say this movie wasn't great because blah 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 blah. And to those people,
Mm-hmm.
we have to say thank you because they keep people on their toes. They keep the people like you and me who are just movie fans almost ready to pay attention to those small details and say, I appreciate it. I appreciate that small detail for what it is. I appreciate that there was a mistake because it shows me that nobody, no matter how good a filmmaker you are, no matter how good an actor, no matter how good a writer, there's always people making
Mm.
mistakes, even if it's small. And
Yeah.
those mistakes show that we are still human.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of grounds every movie that's out
Yeah.
there.
Oh yeah.
Wow, we have gone
Trying to
on a
think.
tangent far from the mask.
Yeah. Going back to the mask. Trying to think what else to talk about. Um, um, in the comic that I'm pretty sure, and also they also as you mentioned for the Son of the Mask, they did actually like canonize. It is definitely that Loki made this mask. As I feel like they were. I feel like for this film though, particularly, they were like, we don't want to be. We want to keep it like a little bit ominous, whether or not he actually was the one who made it, or if it's just mysterious origins.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely never see anything in terms of direct reference. The only time that's
No,
ever
I think
mentioned is Ben Stein,
would Bentine, and that's the
the masked
scientist.
professional guy. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I would
We
not be
all wear
on.
masks.
I kind of feel like I feel like though it's obviously just headcanon and now so it doesn't really matter. But I feel like there could be something said of maybe that guy that he goes to asking about the mask. I feel like he could secretly be Loki, which would be
I suppose it's
interesting.
possible. Um, because we're talking about Son of the Mask in the same conversation, Loki does appear in Son of the Mask,
Mhm.
played by Alan Cumming.
Yeah.
Um, do I think the
I don't
mask guy
think you
is
can.
him?
I don't think that you can say just because he was played by a different actor in that he would be that he's
Well, yeah,
that it's
because Loki is a
definitely
shapeshifter.
because yeah, and also if I remember from what I've heard, like all of the characters from the mask that appear in that are all played by different actors.
Yeah, I think that's well, maybe. I don't know.
Is Stanley in that ad?
No, no,
He's not. So his
nope.
son is in that ad, but he's just is
It's not
nowhere to
even.
be
It's not
found.
even. It's not even his son.
Oh,
It's a totally different person having the mask.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
it's completely unrelated to the first movie in every single way.
Okay, but
It is
so.
like a totally different sport. It's like reading a book from a different genre. It's like listening to
Oh
country and then
God.
going on to listen to death metal. There's no similarities. I did just kind of think about a reason to argue my own point though about how Loki isn't necessarily referenced in the movie besides by Ben Stein. The fact that the mask turns you green and Loki's color is green, I feel
Mhm.
like that's a safe.
Yeah,
I'm probably just reaching.
definitely. I know. I definitely do think that the mask is created by the god Loki, but I do kind of feel like the film was trying to like keep it a little bit open ended.
Yeah, I mean, they kept it grounded to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why.
Grounded is a weird word for this film, but yeah, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. They didn't they didn't bring religion or Norse mythology into it much.
hmm Well, I don't think there's really much else to talk about for this film. So, is there anything you'd like me to say in an announcer voice as I said this off?
Ooh, yes, I'm gonna type it to you though.
All right, all right. My
Irresistible.
name is Cuban Pete. I'm the king of the Roomba beat.
I make the beat go chick chicky boom, chick chicky boom, chick chicky boom.
All right. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. If you like this game analysis, please give a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and a 5-star rating on Spotify. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the movie, so please let me know. If you'd like to listen to more from me, please subscribe. Many more game analysis from me coming, so keep on the lookout. This again is your host, Master John, signing off.